everybody, and welcome back to the United Stand. Today we've got an exclusive interview. We're going to be talking about Onana, we're going to be talking about transfers, we're going to be talking about Mason Mount on the pre-season tour, ownership even a little bit. We are with David McDonnell from The Mirror.
Football fanatics, get ready. The United Stand pre-season tour is here, powered by OneFootball, the ultimate app for live scores, transfers and match stats. Download now. No one gets you closer.
David, you enjoying Oslo? Are you happy to be here? You excited for the game later?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is my 20th pre-season tour with Manchester United. Yeah, exactly. So I'm showing my age there. Yeah, it's always an exciting time. I mean, it feels, working out the other day, I think it's only about 5 weeks since United last played a competitive game in the cup final against City. So, yeah, a short break, but I'm sure the players will be refreshed and recharged and ready for the pre-season ahead.
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, it's a good squad. We've got some first-team players in there, also a lot of youngsters as well. But one thing I did pick up on looking at the squad was the goalkeeper situation. Yeah. Obviously, Heaton's the most experienced goalkeeper there. You've obviously got the likes of Kovar and Bishop, who are a little bit more inexperienced, probably hoping to get some minutes. But realistically, United don't have a first-team keeper right now. De Gea's exit, and Onana looks like he's on the horizon. How close do you think Ten Hag is to getting Onana in?
I mean, what we're told, it's getting closer. They're trying to reach a compromise on a fee, which will be in the region of about 42, 43 million pounds. In an ideal world for Erik Ten Hag, he'd have Onana here now. But I think if he can get the deal done before the team go to America, I think they fly after the friendly in Edinburgh next week. If you can get Onana on board by then, I think he'll be happy. But you're right, Beth. It's not an ideal situation. You want to have all the players on board and work with the squad and know the kind of players you're working with and be able to kind of develop a kind of a rapport and a style of play and really get them on board early on, and that's not happened. But I think the Onana deal is getting closer, so I wouldn't anticipate too many problems with that. I'd reckon by the time they go to the States, he should be a Manchester United player.
Exactly. We've heard it's just like, discussing the add-ons and stuff like that. Obviously, it was surprising to everyone the way De Gea left the club. He was obviously, everyone thought he was going to be the keeper going into the pre-season, and things change around pretty quickly. Is there anything you can tell us to your information around De Gea's exit, how that really came about?
Well, I think, Erik Ten Hag, it's clear that he wants to play a different style of football. Yeah. He's looked at the way Ederson has transformed Manchester City, Alisson at Liverpool. Keepers now, the modern keeper plays out from the back, builds up from the back. And with the greatest respect to David De Gea, he was a great servant for Manchester United. He didn't have the skill set to do that. I mean, he was dropped by Spain because of that very reason. He didn't play for Spain because he couldn't play with his feet, essentially. So that was an issue, and I think in the talks that United had with De Gea and his representatives, it was said in no uncertain terms that you won't be number one next season, and you have to take a pay cut because he was the top earner on $375,000.
Did that only just happen recently? I'm assuming.
No, that was over the course of the last few months that those discussions happened, and I think David De Gea realised that he didn't want to spend time on the bench. He didn't want to, take a huge pay hike. And I think he felt after, a lot of soul searching that the time was right to leave Manchester United. And, people can have their opinions on De Gea. Some will say, they didn't rate him as a keeper. Some will say, some will be firmly in his camp. But I mean, to play 540 odd games, I think 545 was it? Something?
I know it's a record amount, 12 years as well.
12 years. He won everything, effectively apart from the Champions League, obviously, that he could win at Manchester United. So he can look back on a great career there. But the squad, and the team, and the club have to move forward. And that's what Erik Ten Hag was brought in to do. He's brought in to make ruthless decisions, brought in to make tough decisions. I don't think it was a particularly tough decision to kind of get rid of David De Gea, but he was firm in saying, look, you won't be my number one next season. I'm going to bring another keeper. It's up to you what you do. And of course, I think with that, faced with that scenario, David De Gea has felt, look, the time's right to leave.
I think it really shows that Erik Ten Hag is getting serious about what he wants from this team, and it's nice to have a manager that's, putting his foot down on certain decisions and going with what he wants. We've seen Pep do it, we've seen Klopp do it, we've seen, Arteta did it with Ramsdale, so it's exciting to see, and I'm excited for Onana to come in. But, we've already got Mason Mount in, which I'm going to ask you about in a little bit. He could make his debut today, I think he will. So we've got Mason Mount in. Looks like we're going to get Onana. Again, we talk about financial fair play. 120 million it looks like we've got about to spend. With the fees of them two players, looking towards getting a striker in, I mean, it's looking a little bit difficult. And also with the ownership situation hanging over Erik Ten Hag, are we any close to some sort of resolution on this?
I mean, the takeover saga, I don't think anyone knows when that's going to be resolved. There have been so many final bids, deadlines. We speak to certain parties and they feel that they're making a breakthrough, and then of course there's radio silence on the takeover front. So I think what Erik ten Hag has to do is block all that out. He has to just concentrate on, trying to get the players over the line with John Murtough, trying to get the players in that he wants. And also the other issue for Manchester United is trying to get players out the door as well. Because you mentioned FFP, they've really got to offload players to raise funds, to generate funds rather, to be able to strengthen the squad and plough that back into the squad. So there's a lot of players. You look at Harry Maguire, you look at Scott McTominay, you look at Fred. These are players, Anthony Martial as well, who, if United can get the right offer, the right money for, they will let them go. And I think so. It's as much about outgoings as it is incomings as well. So yeah, there's a lot of business to be done. I mean, we're only in the sort of first week or second week of July now, so the window's got several more weeks to run. But again, we go back to the earlier point. Ideally, from Erik ten Hag's perspective, you want to get the players in straight away and ship those players out that you don't feel are going to be part of your squad, because you don't want players around who are going to bring the mood down, who aren't going to play. But again, from a financial point of view, you want them out the door so you can raise funds to strengthen them.
Exactly. I mean, we spoke a little bit off camera about Anthony Elanga, about him maybe moving to Everton. Also, a lot of news around Fred potentially going. Are these looking likely? Fred to Fulham, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, Fred's here, so, I mean, I don't think that one's imminent. Anthony Elanga's back in Manchester training. Everton, there's been talk of 15 million. I have a feeling that might be a little bit high for Elanga. It may be closer to sort of 8 or 10 million. But these are deals that need to be done. These are deals that need to be done because you can't go into a season with a bloated squad. You've got to trim the squad. Erik ten Hag has told us in the past he doesn't like to work with a huge squad. He wants to work with a squad of sort of 23, 24 players, 22, 23, 4 players. So again, you've got to trim the kind of players that aren't going to play and regenerate the squad. So yeah, there's going to be plenty of business done over the coming weeks, but before they get on that plane to America, I think we'll see maybe a couple of signings.
Yeah, you assume that he wants to work with players that are important to his squad, the ones that he can see for the future, and you can tell not many of them are. We've seen Henderson, he's back at home, recovering from injury potentially slightly, but also he wants to leave, doesn't he? He wants to go to Nottingham Forest. Yeah. That is one that could bring in a decent sum of money to bring in to, put back into the squad. And something that Man United fans are crying out for is a striker. We thought that was a priority going into this window. We spoke about Kane or Osman being the targets and having to lower our expectations. What route do you see Man United going down when it comes to a striker?
Well, there are two options at the moment, as far as I can see. Rasmus Hojlund, from Atalanta, and Kolo Muani as well. So those are the two players that they're looking at. There's talk of Mason Greenwood, of course, no decision made on his future yet. We're anticipating a decision from the club before the start of the season, but there's been suggestions that he may go on loan, possibly to Atalanta, as a kind of make-way in the Rasmus Hojlund deal to kind of lower the price. Because I think Atalanta are asking about 80 million, I think, or they're sort of valuing about 70 or 80 million, which is great. Yeah, United won't pay that. They won't pay that. They value him at more sort of 40 million, 45 million, which is a reasonable.
I still think it's a bit much for someone of, who's only scored 9 goals.
He's only 20 years old, and he's not proven, out, So I think that there's going to be a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes there. Greenwood could become a factor in that deal if they can include him on loan going that way and maybe bring the price down for Hojlund. Then there might be a deal done there. But you can't, as you say, you can't go into a season with Martial as your main striker because with all the best from the world, he cannot stay fit. And over the last 6 years or so, he's proved that. So you need to bring a striker in. You need to bring a number 9 in to build the team around.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Greenwood probably moving to Italy. There's been so many conflicting reports on him, but it does seem like the loan is where it is heading to with him. Do you think potentially could be a decision where he ends up staying at United?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. Manchester United have got a really difficult decision there because obviously all the charges against him have been dropped. He's essentially an innocent man, free now to rebuild his career. But of course, there's a lot of I'd say anger towards Mason Greenwood, understandably so. A lot of fans don't want to see him back in a Manchester United shirt. I can understand that. A lot of Man United fans do want him back because he's a great player. It's a really difficult moral decision for Manchester United to make. I think if they bring him back, they're going to be criticised. If they let him go, they'll be criticised. So it's not an enviable position that they're in. I think the best solution as it stands, and the easiest one for them, and they'll be accused of kicking the can down the road if this happens anyway, but I think they'll probably go out on loan. I think they'll give Manchester United a chance to gauge the reaction. He's not played for 18 months, remember, as well, from a playing perspective, let alone, the public perception of him. It's a long, so I think the most sensible course of action would probably be, if they can agree a loan deal, to send him out on loan, and just gauge the reaction to him, from there. And because obviously, if he came back to Manchester United, it would be a pretty brutal, reception that awaits him from opposition fans. Every ground he goes to away, he's going to be subjected to abuse. Players are anyway. Rival players are subjected to abuse. But I think with him, it would be, magnified. So it's a huge decision for Manchester United to make. But we do expect that decision to be made before the start of the season, certainly in the next 3 weeks.
What I did want to ask, and obviously I don't know, you might not even know anything on this subject, you might not want to speak on it, so it's completely up to you, but there has been reports coming out that Erik ten Hag would like to have him back. Do you know anything about that at all? And maybe players even?
Yeah, there's been talk of some players wanting him back in the squad, some players not wanting him back in the squad. When the allegations first surfaced back in January 2022, a lot of players stopped following Mason Greenwood on social media. So that was a pretty clear indication of how they felt about him. Now, whether that's changed over time, I don't know. But certainly, I think from a playing perspective, of course, he's such a gifted player. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said he was the best finisher at the club. Can play with both feet. He's quick. He's versatile. He's a fantastic player. So any manager would want him back from that perspective. But I think Erik ten Hag realises that it's a sensitive issue, and there's more to it than just welcoming him back into the fold. There's a real moral maze that Manchester United have to kind of navigate here. Taking on board the players, the sponsors, fans, the women's team. There are so many different I hate the word, but stakeholders and people involved in this decision that they have to get it right. So as I said, it's a really unenviable position to be in, but they have to make that decision. It's going to be a tough one, and whatever they decide, they'll be criticised. But I think they'll complete the whole process, and we'll find out in the next few weeks.
Yeah, it'll be, we'll just have to wait for that decision. But I want to bring it on to more of a positive note now, because it is the pre-season tour. It's the first game, and we've got a new number 7, and it is Mason Mount. I was reading your article about Ten Hag's confidence in Mason Mount and how much he wanted him at the club. We spoke to Darren Fletcher on the way in here on the plane, and he was saying he's seen him in training, he ticks every single box, he thinks he's going to be a brilliant player for them. What is it about Mason Mount that draws Erik ten Hag to him? Why was it a priority for him?
I think he's an energetic player. He's got that work rate off the ball as well that Erik ten Hag demands of his players. He's creative. He scores. He can provide assists as well. I think he's a kind of typical dynamic young player. And people look at the fee of 60 million or 55 plus 5 million add-ons and say, well, for a player with 1 year left on his contract, that was an awful lot of money. But I think, if you look at the length of contract, 5 years plus the option for an extra one, I think if he is as successful as Erik ten Hag feels he can be, I think it'll be money well spent. He picks up space in pockets, and that's a real key feature of Mason Mount. He can sort of play through the opposition press. He can get behind defences and everything. He's just a real little sort of a conjurer, if you like. He can get in, he can create things from nothing. And obviously last season he had injuries. It was difficult for him. I think he only scored 4 goals. He knew from January, February that he wasn't going to be wanted at Chelsea, that he had to look elsewhere. And he said as soon as he heard of Manchester United's interests, there was only one place he wanted to go. And Erik ten Hag personally made it his mission to get him. I think he sold the club to Mason, his vision of the club, and how he wants him to be such an important player. And you said a new number 7. That's an indication of how highly he rates him, that he's given him such an iconic shirt, worn by such legends in the past. So I think he'll be a key player. I think it's a great move for Mason, because I think he needed to relaunch his career. It had gone stale at Chelsea. Okay, had injury problems last season, but even if he was fit, I don't think he'd have played that much. So he's a player that fans might not be excited about, but I think he's a player that will give a different dimension to Manchester United and give the team a kind of different option.
Exactly. It's super exciting to have him in the team, and hopefully we get to see him provide what you've just said, what you've just explained about him today. The number 7 shirt isn't given out lightly. Erik ten Hag must highly rate him, exactly what you said, and it is starting to rain here, so I'm going to wrap it up with this last question. Talks about another midfielder potentially coming in, like an Amrabat or something like that. Is from what you've heard, is that the route Erik ten Hag wants to go down? Yeah,
I think he wants another player with that kind of industry in there as well, to play alongside Casemiro. I watched him at the World Cup in Qatar, from Morocco. Against France, he was sensational. It was sensational throughout the whole tournament. I think, if you can get him in, again, we talked about financial fair play. If you get him in for 25-30 million, that would be an absolute bargain, I think. And he's a player, who it might be a big name. It's just starting to pour now, wouldn't it? I know. He's a player that's not necessarily a big name, and but I think he'd be a really effective signing. I think players respect him and respect the job he does. So I think he'd be a fantastic addition to the squad if they can get it done.
Yes, I'm excited. And lastly, give me a name. Who are you most excited for on the pre-season tour? Youth player, maybe?
Kobe Mino, I think. I'd like to see him. I think he made his debut against Charlton, did he, in the League Cup, and he looked exciting. I'd like to see him. Obviously, Shola Shortar as well. I mean, there's lots of young players who, this is a real opportunity for them to, sort of show what they can do, and stake their claim for a regular place in the first team squad. They've got the game here, the game in Murrayfield, and then the tour in America. So there's plenty of youth in the squad, and that's always good for Manchester United.
Exactly. It's going to be a good pre-season. David, thank you so much for doing this interview with us. It is. We've brought the rain from Manchester in Norway, but hopefully this isn't a sign for how the game's going to go. Well, by the time this goes out, we'll know. So hopefully it's been a good result for Manchester United. But thank you everyone for watching these interviews. Thank you, David, for being here. And hopefully it's a really good pre-season tour for Man United. We can get more signings in, and Erik ten Hag steps it up a level with this Man United team. But thank you everyone for watching. Make sure you hit a like on the video, and we'll see you on the next one.